Hello, everyone, and welcome to
Hi.
Dice Jailers. I'm
Yes,
Jordan,
I'm Bjorn.
and this week we are going to talk about backgrounds and how to use them and how to weave them into story things so that they're more interesting and more useful than just like, well, I got two proficiencies for that.
Yeah, and also a certain amount of what not to do, as
Also, yes.
there are a couple things you want to try and avoid, like the plague, if you can.
Yeah. And if you watch our episode on character creation,
Yep,
some of the things that we say now will overlap, and that's just going to happen. But before
guaranteed.
we get into talking all about that, Bjorn, how have you been this week, man?
Not bad. I won't lie; it's been very nice to have warmer weather for a few days.
Mm-hmm.
That's been fun. Um, Honestly, I'm still kind of riding high from our one shot spectacular. That was so much fun. And while I would love to have run it with the 4 hours it recommends, I kind of enjoyed it on fast forward, where it was like you have an hour of setup and you have an hour of mayhem. Go.
And
And
that hour of mayhem was definitely friggin' mayhem.
it was such a delight. And I knew sort of what people were playing beforehand, but I didn't know how these characters were going to come to life. And so that was a real blast for me. And I really liked the fact that I could see all of your guys' secrets on my notes in front of me. So watching as certain things were unfolding or things people were trying to do, um, that was a delight for me. And uh, after that, I haven't done a whole lot the rest of this week. Oh, we had 420 this week.
Yep.
So on Tuesday, I got really high, and that was nice. That was good. Had
Word.
had some nice edibles and was very relaxed and wonderfully high, and I slept silently. So it's a good day.
420 edibles and nap day.
Yeah. What about you?
I mean, I've recorded a couple auditions for things because recorded like film theater is starting to come back
Yeah,
into
a bit it
being
is.
a
Yeah.
thing, which is wild to me. But I'm fully vaccinated, so I'm here. Uh, so I'm able to do things safely. Uh,
Exactly.
a little bit of cleaning as per usual, just
Sure.
because I'm an adult. So I'm just in a perpetual state of cleaning.
It never ends.
I hate it.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Like,
But really, it's
apparently,
just been yeah, it's just been getting those auditions done
yeah.
and maintaining.
Yeah, I think what is that I read recently that being an adult is really just it doesn't matter how many dishes you've done, you have dishes to do.
Oh, absolutely.
That
That's
basically
the
sums it up perfectly.
yeah, dishes are the one thing that I definitely didn't do. But I mean my floor is clean, so that's
Okay, there
nice.
you can eat off the floor. That's a figure of speech.
Absolutely not.
Okay, so not so
No.
much.
No. It's carpet here, bud. No.
Don't want to eat carpet.
Ab- Shut the hell up. I do
That's what
not
that
want to
means, right?
eat. Yep, 100%. That's what it means for the clean edit of our show.
Sure does.
Imagine if we made a clean edit. Like,
I'm gonna get us flagged for the stupidest thing.
I eventually.
It's gonna happen.
It's,
It's gonna
yeah, it's
happen.
totally gonna happen.
That's
But, I mean, yeah, I've just been maintaining what I do all the time and kind of getting back into what I do for a living besides, I just do this.
sure.
You know. And it's important to me what I do for a living because it's a big part of who I am. And
And where you
so
came from.
yeah, and getting back into doing shows, it's nice. It shows off those skills and talents that I've been cultivating through a good amount of my life that don't really come up anywhere else.
No, just things that it's what you do. It may not come up in all aspects of your day-to-day life, but you know it as part of your background.
Hmm. And that's how we segue, boys.
So yeah,
So when it
background.
Yeah, when it comes to backgrounds for different tabletop games, they're incorporated in different ways. Most famously in Pathfinder, as well as a bit in 3.5 and heavily in 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons. Your background is going to end up giving you statistical bonuses, not
Yes.
just these are things that your character did before they were an adventurer, which is an
Yeah.
important distinction depending on which system you're playing in.
And honestly, using just the backgrounds within the player's handbook, I think there's a ton that most players can work with. I see nothing wrong with creating your own custom background, but I think for
No.
newer players, really look at those personality traits, the ideals, bonds, and flaws most of
Hmm.
all, which we'll get to in a bit.
And
And
flaws are much bigger in 3.5 and Pathfinder than in 5th edition, because
yes,
flaws in 3.5 and in Pathfinder and in Pathfinder 2 as well, flaws come along with a statistical negative, but then you get to take a boon, which is a big statistical positive, and it's a
yeah,
whole
help
balancing act
balance
of
out.
you have a
But
peg leg, but you can also see in the dark.
exactly, like I don't think you need to let those traits, bonds, ideals, and flaws. I don't think you need to let them rule everything you do. But I think it's a really good way to help shape your character. If
Hmm.
you basically have it like, yeah, my character, because they're an outlander, anytime they're in a town, they feel a little bit like a fish out of water. That's that's a worthwhile thing to have, and it can really help inspire a lot of role play.
And
And
it's a good
so,
place to start.
yes, um, I I want to say now, just because you said place to start, do not, when you are starting a new campaign, game, whatever, if you're a player, do not come to your DM with a 70-page lore doc of your character's background. They're not going to read it, nor should they read it, especially if you're a
Yeah.
low level character. You're level 1. I want you to look at who Bilbo Baggins was before Gandalf and the dwarves showed up. He was just a dude who lived in the Shire, who wanted to eat and smoke his pipe weed. That's what he was. And I think
Hmm.
that's a great example of a level 1 adventurer.
Yeah.
Is you look at Bilbo Baggins and you can find, traits, ideals, flaw. Like you could say his flaw is that he was scared. He didn't want
Hmm.
he didn't particularly want to go, but he had this obligation, and that makes a really interesting character.
Yeah.
We don't need to know everything about who he was beforehand. So yes, your 70-page doc, um, just
It's
don't.
not all that necessary. If you
Yeah,
want to write that out for you,
yes,
absolutely do it. But give your DM the bullet points.
exactly. Yeah, if they break one sheet, that's it. It should be
Yeah.
one page, single sided, and that should be like the bullet points of who
Yeah.
this character is. You
Because
know,
your DM does not need to know all the different little particulars of your character's personality and the
no,
backstory. That's
no,
just for you to play. Uh,
exactly.
but on the flip side of that, the things that the DM does need to know about your background is things like family, close friends,
Yes,
any kind of organization that your character might be tied to. Uh, I mean, those are really the big ones, are just
absolutely.
connections.
Yeah, is
Uh,
knowing, are they an orphan, or are their parents still
yeah,
alive?
as well as a thing to remember to think of when you're looking at picking your character's backstory is like Bjorn mentioned, is you got to be cognizant of what level your character is.
Yes, yes,
And I think fifth edition does a poor way at this by some of the backgrounds that are listed.
some of them I think give you a little more than you should have at level
Yeah.
1, and some of them give you next to nothing. Now, I will give one caveat on that 70-page lore doc. If you have a DM that's like, hey kids, we're starting at level 17, this is going to be only high level play, then at that point, you could be like, hey, look, here's all the adventures they went on. We brought them up to this point. If you want to read it, you can. Still have the bullet points, but then that
Yeah,
story is going to be a little more interesting.
bullet
Um,
points. Always bullet points.
exactly. Um, every background that's in the player's handbook or Xanathar's or some of the adventures have their own backgrounds in them. All of them will have a specific trait that it gives you. Some
Again,
of these,
this is talking about 5th edition.
yes, yeah. And in fifth edition, some of these traits will never come up. Still be mindful of them because they can be really interesting for role play. Like if you have the criminal background, you get to have a criminal connection from that and use that as an opportunity to work with your DM to come up with who that might be. The entertainer, you can always find a place to play. Some of them are pretty cool. The entertainer one doesn't help you a whole lot if you're in a dungeon somewhere. So your party members would be like, yeah, why don't you go play outside so you don't alert everything here where we are.
Now, when it comes to other tabletop games and other editions of Dungeons and Dragons, and like talking about Pathfinder,
Yeah.
talking about GURPS, talking about Big Eyes Small Mouth and Fate, uh, all of things that all of those games have in common when you're making your character's backstory is that you have to be aware of what level you're at, and
Yes.
you also have to be aware of where your game is going to start. If it's a one shot, that second part isn't so important.
Right.
But if you're playing a longer campaign, you're gonna want to know, like, if your DM hasn't made already, you're gonna want to know kind of the geography or the layout of the world if it's a homebrew world,
Yes.
or if it's not a homebrew world, you still want that. But so you can pick like where your character's from, because that can also inform a lot of things for your character's personality, and can even change which background type you go with. Because like
Right.
in some systems, your background isn't statistically important, but it's role play important. And in 3.5 and Pathfinder, while your background while there are some background feats that you can get, a lot of that background stuff that you're going to play into is going to be where you choose to put your skill points.
Yep.
And that can be a fun way to play it. I remember one of my characters that I played in 3.5, uh, he was classic ranger, out in the woods, animal companion, all of that. But one extra thing that I added to his skills, it was just a random thing that I put extra skill points into, and that was in sailing,
Okay.
because he grew up on a lake. He grew up on a lake in the forest, and so he had a small boat. So he did have skills in piloting a ship. It was just, a canoe, but
And
still.
I think there is a certain amount in fifth edition where you can make some of those aspects of previous iterations like 3.5 or systems like Pathfinder, where
Mhm.
you can bring that into fifth edition in a different way. Um,
Yeah, it comes into picking your proficiencies when you can,
yeah,
and
like
I it's one thing that I heavy miss uh when playing 5th edition as opposed to playing pretty much any other system,
sure,
is that I can't go and just put skill points in a thing that aren't necessarily related to my character's main class, just because, well, he wouldn't have trained it in the class. But what if he did it when he was not training to fight?
right. You can't just have it where you have, say, survival. If you didn't take proficiency, you would have to
Hmm.
increase your wisdom score, which would increase all wisdom skills. And
Yeah,
maybe you're thinking, but I wouldn't have some of those other ones. And I will definitely agree for sheer skill customization, fifth edition doesn't have anywhere near the customization of like 3.5 or
but
Pathfinder.
it's way less complicated.
Correct. Like
Yeah.
I love fifth edition for its simplicity. It is my favorite edition of D&D that I've played. And even the aspects of it where I go, man, I sometimes wish I had a little more flexibility with my skills and whatnot. There are ways to get around that to some extent. And one
Hmm.
of the ways is with backgrounds.
Hmm.
Obviously, there are some backgrounds that just go hand in hand, peanut butter and jelly. You're
Yep.
playing a rogue, you take a criminal background. I mean,
Yep. Or you take the urchin background
yeah,
or the charlatan background.
yeah. The proficiencies
Man,
you get go right in line with a rogue, and that's great. However, maybe you're going, oh, you know what? I'm going to take the noble background. And this is kind of, maybe you decided you're a prince. And what people don't know is that when it gets dark,
you're the
you,
Prince of Persia.
yeah, you fucking sneak out and steal shit because you can. Because you also know if you get caught, you're the prince. And what are they
You'll
going to
be
do about
fine.
it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And instantly to me, that like that becomes an interesting character where it's like, oh, you kind of do it just because you know you can get away with it. And to me, that also kind of helps go into this character flaw because I can already see how that's going to create a little bit of turmoil in the party when that
Hmm.
comes up, especially if someone in your party does have the criminal or urchin background and they find out, wait a minute, you with this position of privilege, you're doing all these things just because you can, but I did it to survive.
Yeah.
And that can create a really interesting moment.
And that can be some really fun stuff. And that's really what I mean, the biggest piece of this episode for us is going to be is
Is fun.
explaining to you and showing you how uh using backgrounds that are off type, so to speak,
Yeah,
and finding justifications for that are going to be some of your best ways to come up with interesting characters without putting a whole lot of effort into it.
exactly.
Because that's another thing is that, like, I know I agonize over coming up with backgrounds and coming up with a past for my characters because I have so many millions of ideas floating through my head,
Right,
and
right.
I don't know how to pick which one, or which one will be the most fun this time.
True. And honestly, I think the best way to use the tables in fifth edition for each background, when it talks about rolling for the different options, what I like to do for myself when I know, okay, this is the background I'm going with, I will roll because here's what often happens: you'll roll, and the one you roll, you just go, nah, that's not my character, and that's good. Rule that one out. There's nothing that says you have to keep what you rolled. I like to use dice to help me learn to trust my gut if I'm not quite sure how I want to go with it. Because like you, I have so many possibilities that it might be okay. I know I'm doing a bard with a criminal background.
Mm-hmm.
I have a dozen of those. I have a
Yeah.
dozen different ones ready to go. So I can roll. And if the one that comes up I don't like, that's going to help guide me towards which one I actually
Mm-hmm.
do. Though, Bard with entertainer background, I'm not going to scoff at it. It makes perfect sense.
No.
But I would say find a background that maybe doesn't make as much sense and see if you can
Yeah.
get something out of that.
And see if you can make it make sense.
Yeah.
And with those and thinking about mostly in terms of 5th edition, but is very easily applicable to other systems, is thinking about your character's closest connections.
Yes.
Because I'll tell you one thing in a background that always makes me just kind of squirm a little bit as a DM is when someone brings in a character and everyone that they've been close to is dead.
It's boring.
Yeah, I'm just like, great, cool, so you have no friends and nothing.
Yeah.
So what's your point in doing anything, bud?
It's it's played out because then I already know the next thing they're going to tell me is they prefer to work alone
Oh
because
gods.
they don't. Yeah. And at that point, I just want to ask, why are you playing Dungeons and Dragons? This is a collaborative, cooperative game.
Yeah.
Not that you can't have a character that doesn't necessarily trust people, but one, you don't have to be an aggressive dick about
Yep.
it. You
That.
really
Yep.
don't. Like, find the common ground with your other party members. And if they ask you for details on your past, you can simply say, I don't know you well enough to trust you with that information,
Mm-hmm.
and go from there. But you don't have to be this dickbag edge lord. Have have fun where everyone can have fun.
But like some of the best things in backgrounds can come from how you play off of your character's connections. Maybe your character does only have one or two.
Sure.
Like this popped up in my brain when you were mentioning your bard with the criminal background. Is maybe your closest connection isn't that criminal contract. It's a friend of yours that's in the band with you,
Yeah.
and you tell your DM, by the way, this friend of mine that I'm in a band with would love me to stop stealing and just play music.
Yes.
That is an amazing gift to give your DM.
And you know what else is an amazing gift to give your DM is just friends your character has. Because here's what's going to happen. The party goes on some adventures, does some things. There's excitement, there's danger, there's shenanigans. And
Mm-hmm.
then, after a few levels and however many sessions, you're in a town and you meet the close friend of one of the party members. And everyone else in the party is just going to bust that character's balls,
Oh yeah.
be their good friend. And it makes for great role play. And what it can really do is when you have those more shy players, because not everyone is as comfortable with role play as each other. Jordan and I, being actors,
Mm-hmm.
we have the gift of performing for so long that, oh, I have to just improv and come up with all this stuff and faff it out as my character.
It's
Great.
secondhand.
Yeah. And you get some people who don't come out of their shell as much. But now, when it's the idea of like, oh, we can totally tease Zimmenhofer's character now because here we are with their best friend. That's a very familiar thing.
And
Where
just, hey, remember the time that you thought it was a good idea to try and slide down that mountain on your shield?
yeah, that's exactly what you get,
Yeah.
and it can be great. And also, it can be free ways for your DM to have a chance to heighten drama. Once
Yeah.
somebody's friend or loved one is in potential danger, the choices that'll have to be made, and maybe even having a moment where a party member has to decide between their best friend and the party. Because maybe it looks like their
Mm-hmm.
best friend is breaking bad, their best friend's going evil, and now you have a party that wants to stop and maybe kill that person, but you have one person in the party that would rather redeem them. It's not like I
Mm-hmm.
did this in the campaign I'm running that
Yeah,
Jordan's
no.
in.
Not at all.
And it went on for months. And it ended up being a really beautiful story where that character did redeem his friend. But there was a chance he wasn't going to. And he had party members saying to him, listen, I get that you want to save him, but if it's his ass or mine, I'm going to kill him.
That he says party members saying that. It was me. It was me
Yeah.
saying that.
And but what was ultimately great, your character was the one that would have had the opportunity, dead to rights, to finish him.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't do it because this brother in arms who had been by your side and helped fight and help protect you guys, you basically went, I am not killing him for you. I'm
Yep.
going to give you your chance to redeem him because you care.
And none of that could have happened if he didn't put this brother in arms of his in his background.
Yes, yeah, like the player's name, Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
He and I kind of worked on his background together, sort of from some stuff I had pulled out of the air because he changed characters mid-campaign, which ended up being really cool. And then as we started fleshing it out, I was like, okay, here's where this is going to get introduced. So I promise that'll come up. And it was this wonderful surprise for all these other characters where they're like, wait, why is this guy calling you brother? Oh, he's your brother in arms. You know him from where? And as a DM, it gave me free fuel to advance the story.
Yes. One thing though with those connections is that there is no need, because I know we've mentioned the like really important ones, but there is no need when you're adding those bonds and adding those friendships. There's no need to make all of them super important or even super close.
Right.
Because I mean, you've got to remember to treat your character that you're making, especially with their backstory, as more or less a person rather than this is the hero, because usually the backstory part is before being a hero.
It is. It
And
is. And
so, and that's why for one in 5th edition, uh the background of folk hero sticks in my craw a little bit,
yeah,
because like, how are you going to be a folk hero at level 1? And
yeah,
there is one particular way that a party member of mine has turned it, which I think is absolutely hilarious. I think I've told you about it.
you
uh
have. And
yeah,
share,
but
share with the internet, 'cause I think it's amazing.
so my one of my lovely friends is, we started at level 1, playing through Icewind Dale, um and took the folk hero background because they're and trying to figure out how to make it make sense, because she saw that background and was like, yes, that's what I want to be. I'm like, okay, but you're level 1.
Yeah.
And so, and then, through working with how to make that make sense, we came up with like, she grew up in and with a group of dragon slayers. She would go out with them hunting and usually stay back. And on one of the first times she was actually allowed in the hunting party, the dragon choked to death on her. And that's how her folktale was created, was she killed a dragon,
Technically,
kinda.
which
And
I think
so,
is
yeah.
great.
And
Because
so then it gives me as a DM the fun of every time they meet someone new, anytime I decide to have an NPC recognize her character's name, to roll and see if they know the true story or the folktale.
yeah, like, looking at some of the folk hero defining events, like, some of them are really cool, but again, like you say, you're level 1,
Mm-hmm.
and I think adding a twist to it, like what happened here with this Dragon Slayer,
Mm-hmm.
is more interesting. Um, I'm looking at it right now, and one of the defining events is I stood alone against a terrible monster. But to me, that becomes really interesting if it's like, sure, you stood alone against a terrible monster, and maybe you did kill it, but it was purely accidental.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you happened to have, like, the only weapon you had was a knife from your household. The blade happened to be made of silver, and you didn't know that. And that's how you killed the lycanthrope. And you didn't do it
Mm-hmm.
because you were brave. It was just
It
happenstance.
was just self-preservation.
Yeah, I think of the animated Sword in the Stone, where
Mm-hmm.
Arthur doesn't want the sword. Yeah, at first he's like, I'm a kid, I'm nobody, I can't be destined to be king. That is a way more interesting folk hero origin to me than it's like, well, yeah, I single-handedly drove off this invading militia. I'm like, why aren't you level 5? You sound like a badass. You sound
Mm-hmm.
like an NPC that my characters should be interacting with, not this low-level thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like we said, understand the level you're starting at, because
Now,
that'll really help drive things.
now we've gotten into, like, mostly talking about 5th edition, uh
Yes.
and we might as well talk about some background choices that are done very often,
Yep.
and try and get into like why it's done, and give some alternates for people. You can be like, it's kind of like this but different, so you're not the same character as like 4 other people.
I mean, I have the one I want to start with.
Go for it.
And I will admit, the character I'm playing right now actually has this background. So I'll say, I know it's not original. Um, I don't care it's not original. Uh, I like it, but it's done to death.
Hmm. Oh,
Um,
and that is an important thing to say when we jump off onto this road, is that just because it's done a lot doesn't mean it's bad, doesn't mean you
exactly.
shouldn't do it.
No.
It's really just for, like, if you're wanting to not do the same thing, here are
Right.
some ideas.
Yeah, because I mean, you're going to find some of these. You're just going to go, oh, that is totally my character, but
Hmm.
there's nothing wrong with that. And this one, there are two that kind of go hand in hand, and it is the sage slash cloistered scholar um, for a wizard.
Yep.
These are very commonly taken, and part of the reason is you get arcana and history with these.
Yep.
With the sage, you get the researcher background and
Hmm.
the suggested characteristics, for the traits, ideal, bond, and flaw. They they work really well. Like I chose sage for my wizard. My favorite aspect actually is his flaw. I chose one of the pre-written ones, and that is unlocking an ancient mystery is worth the price of a civilization. Because to me, that's a really interesting flaw. And that was the whole reason I went with Sage. Now, that
Hmm.
said, um, I think you could make a very interesting wizard as opposed to going Sage. You're going, well, I know I want to have an intelligence ability for free with it. You want proficiency in those, which
Hmm.
which makes sense to me. You do want that, but you could have it instead where you decide that you're a knight. You come from a
Hmm.
place of position and power as a knight, so it makes sense that you would have had the money to go to the school to learn this magic. Maybe that is why you're a knight. You're not there to wear heavy armor and wield weapons. Because if you think about um, like medieval warfare, it wasn't all infantry with swords and armor. There were archers, there were siege engines. You could have been a different part of it. You still
Hmm.
get the history proficiency as a knight. You get persuasion instead of arcana, but you're a wizard. Pick up arcana there instead.
Yeah.
Now that can make it where you go, oh, you know what? Maybe I won't dump charisma like I was thinking about because I have persuasion now. And it can even change how you were going to shape your stats.
Absolutely.
And all of a sudden, you have a very different character from where you started. But to me, if someone comes to the table and they go, "Oh, here's my level one wizard," and I go, "Okay, well, what's their background?" And someone goes, "They're a knight." I'm going to want to hear more about this because
Right.
I haven't seen that before.
And that's part of the thing that you always want to try and do with putting together a memorable character background that is also going to make you want to play it, is because every player is going to want to talk about their beloved character's backstory forever. But if you make a character whose backstory is odd enough that in game the other players will ask you about it, that's what you want, so that you
Yeah,
can get that big long lore dump session out in a way that's not just like, all right, everyone, we're sitting around the campfire, let's talk about our deep dark pasts.
yeah, and make sure it's something that you are into. Like, be excited about it. Don't
Yeah.
pick something just because it's different. Your cleric doesn't have to have the gladiator background just because that's
Although
weird,
that
but
is cool.
that could be all kinds of dope. But I think a great example where it's not a background you see at the table a ton.
Hmm.
We talked about Robin of Locksley, Robin Hood, where as far as what class that character would be, you could say fighter, you could say rogue, could say ranger. I think you could make any of them work. I'm going to lean more towards ranger or rogue with that.
Hmm.
Um, but your background for Robin Hood would be noble.
Yeah.
That's his background. It's not criminal. It's not urchin. It's not urban bounty hunter for F's sake. The
Nope.
background is noble. That's what helps make an interesting character.
Hmm. I know for me, the backgrounds, just because you mentioned Robin of Locksley and My Beloved Rangers, uh, is I have to mention the constantly done because it makes sense is the Outlander background with a ranger.
Sure, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, makes sense. You live out in the forest, you live out in the wilds far from civilization. I mean, totally 100% makes sense. You know what's more interesting to me
Go.
is and I just love using stuff out of Ghosts of Saltmarsh. But
Oh,
for 5th edition, a ranger that is a marine.
sure.
You are the arch, like that immediately makes your character like the archer, maybe the gunner, and definitely the scout in the crow's nest on a ship. And that gives you still all of the same ranger stuff. I mean, it still gives you athletics. It still gives you survival, much like Outlander does. Uh, but it gives you a whole different picture of things to go about. Where like your survival's more going to be knowing about fishing and tides and the weather than it is about how to make your path through this forest.
Which I think gets into a great thing that you can do with a background and your character. You don't always have to go with two that go perfectly hand in hand. The classic criminal rogue
Mm-hmm.
combo. Yes, yes, makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. But we've talked before. One of the most important things you can answer for any role playing game character, not just Dungeons and Dragons, is why is your character an adventurer?
Mm-hmm.
Because they have to have a reason. Adventuring is dangerous. And if everything in your life was hunky dory and you had no reason to risk your life, why
Why
would you?
would you?
So to me,
The
having a
answer is
background,
money, by the way.
exactly, exactly. But having a background that is a little incongruous with your class can be really interesting. Again, talking about, Robin Hood, you have this rogue slash ranger who lives in the woods and robs, rich people going through, but the
Mm-hmm.
background is a noble. And if you have that kind of character in an adventuring party, and all of a sudden it comes up that you were a noble, someone will ask, what happened?
Mm-hmm.
And again, that becomes really interesting because if you're playing a rogue and the background is, well, yeah, I got to watch out because I'm wanted. I'm a criminal. Your whole party's going to go, that makes sense. That,
Mm-hmm.
that checks out. Like, nobody's surprised that my wizard was all cloistered up in this tower, reading over books and constantly poring over lore.
Mm-hmm.
I have different things in his background that I think makes him kind of interesting. But that aspect surprised nobody. But we found out our ranger had a noble background and we
Mm-hmm.
started to go, that's interesting. So
It's
look for those things that can help drive that character for why they're doing what they're
mm-hmm.
doing.
Like my personal favorite uh addition that came up in 5th edition that people that I've been playing with have done for quite a long time,
Uh-huh.
and they finally in 5th edition they made it like an official background that you could choose from. It's from Acquisitions Incorporated, and it's
Okay.
the failed merchant.
Yes, that one's
Because
fun.
because just because it's your background doesn't mean you were good at it.
Yes.
And that is the thing, that is one of the biggest things that like people that I've played with over the years in all different systems, things that have made a character really, really interesting is that thing that they used to do in the past before they were an adventurer. They were bad at it.
Yeah. That's why they're not still doing it.
Yeah. And that can be
And
just such a great pull to do something else. Is your character's just like, well, I've been trying to fish for like 15 years and
but
I
I
can't
suck.
really make a living at it. So let me go fight a monster because either I'll die or I'll learn how to be an adventurer.
Yep,
But if I don't, I'm gonna starve and die anyway.
exactly. I think talking about that, the whole aspect of maybe they suck at it, that kind of gets me into the biggest thing on the table of backgrounds in fifth edition that I
Mm-hmm.
think is really important to look at, and that is the flaw.
Oh yeah.
Now,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
like you said, flaws aren't used the same here as they are, for example, in Pathfinder, where they give you an actual negative statistic, and you
Where you
move
can make
that.
ridiculous happen.
You can, and you can really help cultivate interesting characters to that. And if you are a power gamer, you can totally abuse
Yeah,
the system to make broken characters. Which if
or
I'm not going to
you
test your
can
young,
just
but
make Horserer.
yeah, but what I love is having a flaw with the character. Again, I mentioned my wizard. You know, knowledge is worth the price of an entire civilization. Where it's like he's not saying the life of a person, he's not saying the life of the. He says an entire civilization. And if somebody were to ask, so you're saying you think knowledge is more important than lives? He would simply go, "Did I stutter?"
Yep.
I absolutely do. And some of my party members are starting to learn that. And it has already made them a little uneasy with him, where it's okay, he's powerful, and we need this ally, and he's possibly the smartest one of us. But how far can we really trust him?
Yeah.
And I love that. Maybe you have it where your character has a really short fuse, and if they think an NPC is insulting them, they're going to start a fist fight.
Mhm.
That can be interesting because now you have a party that's like, okay, we've got to keep them cool. We can't let them be insulted. Or maybe you just have a party member who's got a friggin' gambling problem, so they can't
Yep.
be trusted with the money. Like,
And always with flaws though. Remember, don't be a dick about them.
yeah, please don't.
But because that's just the way to ruin anything. It's
Yeah,
don't be a dick about it. Like if your character has a gambling problem, every time you go into a tavern isn't a time to show that.
right, right. Yeah, especially if the reason you're going into this tavern is to meet the old friend of a different party member. This moment is clearly not about you.
And
You can
also in
ask.
general, it's a time suck.
Yeah. Like you can always ask, do I see any games of chance in the bar? You can ask that. And the bartender, if the DM says yes, get back to that if it's needed to. But sometimes just ask the DM to roll percentile dice to see how much money you won or lost.
Yeah, and just like because you can totally if you have a thing like that that usually takes a skill competition or something,
Yeah,
you can tell your DM like, hey, we don't need to role play this out. Just I'm playing cards over there.
exactly. Exactly. And yeah, I think those flaws are a really great thing to lean into because again, a character with no flaws whatsoever
It's
or no
boring.
weaknesses, yeah, like you know, nobody's perfect. And
There's a reason Superman has kryptonite.
yes, yes, and I don't have enough time to get into how that's not only the only technical flaw of that character
You're
because
not wrong.
I can go
Uh,
on for
but that
days.
could be yeah,
Yeah,
that'd be an entire episode.
it would, it would. But yeah, like you know you're driven by your background for certain reasons to get where you are, and your flaw makes up a
Mhm.
portion of who you are, and
And
that's
now
interesting.
there's one bigger thing with your character's background that it is essential, but it is not in any way statistical in fifth edition, in any past edition,
Sure.
and that is the idea of a master objective. This is your character's pie in the sky dreams of
Yes.
what they're trying to do. And that is one thing that like even if your character's background doesn't make sense, even if somehow you're this ridiculous badass at level 1, ignoring all that, if your character has a master objective, that is going to make role playing your character so much easier than anything else. It'll also help keep you from metagaming a bit
Yeah, it will. It will.
because if you have your one thing that your character's about, and do not make the mistake that I did with my first character and make it a revenge quest, because those are not as cool as you think they are.
No, and honestly, revenge quests can put your DM in an awkward situation
Hmm.
because do they have the individual you want revenge against? Do they show up quickly? Do they wait
Hmm.
to have them show up? And then what happens if you get
Yeah.
revenge?
What happens
Now,
if you get your revenge?
yeah, now revenge quests in stories can work, but we are not all Mandy Patinkin playing Inigo Montoya.
Yeah.
And we even see once he's gotten revenge, he flat out says, I don't know what to do with myself.
Hmm. And
Thankfully,
then
he has a friend who's going to offer him a piracy job, but we
yeah,
don't all have that.
and he immediately gets a new master objective, which is nice.
Yes.
But yeah, don't make it a revenge quest. But if you do make it a revenge quest, make sure your character has something further.
Yeah.
Like my DM when I first made my character, when I made that first character that I ever played, very quickly let me kill the character that I was going for revenge against, so that I had to come up with a master objective.
Yeah.
And the master objective after that was, well, now that my character's killed this guy, I need to figure out how to get allowed back into Elven society.
Yep. That's something worthwhile.
Yeah.
So yeah, your objective as a character, that like you're saying, that master objective is, it's so important
Mm-hmm.
because if nothing is driving your character, it can make it difficult if a point in the story comes up that your character would be conflicted with continuing.
Mm-hmm.
Because
And
then
maybe
you
your
reach a
character
point,
does leave. Maybe
yeah,
your character does like finish what they're doing and stop, and that's fine.
and
Just
and
know what it
that's
is.
that's an important thing to say is if you reach a point in the story where you realize your character's objective has been fulfilled, or you realize my character would not continue at this point, don't make that everyone else's problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like at that point, maybe you go, hey, my character is going to walk away now.
Yep.
They're done, and I'm going to make a new character. But if you are at that point where, for whatever reason, because of your master objective, because of something in your background where your character can't continue, don't make everyone else, you know, make the world revolve around you to keep your character in the game.
Mm-hmm.
The overall narrative is more important, and you can fall in love with a new character. It's entirely possible.
Absolutely. And then you have a chance to try out another background
Yes,
combination.
yes, you do, and that's great. It's
And that's
great to have.
part of the fun.
Yeah,
But with
find what works for you.
yeah, but with backgrounds and master objectives, remember that it should be something that your character knows when they've completed.
Yeah,
It's like, sure, your character's master objective could be to be the greatest wizard of all time, but if you don't know what it is to, like, if you as a player don't know what it's going to mean to your character to be the greatest wizard of all time,
yeah,
it's just kind of a weak objective, because you could just sit there and study forever. There's no reason to adventure.
right. Yeah, the master objective I have for my wizard, for example, it is not something I think he has any remote chance of completing during Rime of the Frostmaiden. However, it's something he doesn't know how to complete. So anything where weird, crazy shit that can't be explained is happening, he wants to know how and why it's happening because maybe that'll be that next piece of knowledge he's,
Mm-hmm.
he's seeking. It's this endless desire for knowledge. So his desire to be an adventurer will never wane, but reaching that master objective will likely always be out of his
Yeah.
grasp.
Now, just because we're on master objectives, do you have any that we could list off just to give people a jumping off point? Because I realize these may be hard concepts to come up
Sure.
with.
Honestly, I think and this kind of goes in the revenge quest, but not exactly. So go with me for a sec on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm totally going to rip off something from Critical Role here, where Vax and Vex, when they were young, their town was destroyed by a dragon, and their mother was killed in the process.
Hmm.
Now, they wanted to find that dragon eventually, but they didn't talk about it a lot. And their primary objective just sort of seemed to be keep each other safe.
Hmm.
Well, that dragon did end up rearing its ugly head in the story. And when they realized this is that same dragon, then it was personal. It wasn't
Hmm.
just, oh hey, we need to kill him because he's killing innocent people. It was that's the bastard that torched our town, and
Hmm.
things like that can be cool. Um, Understand that dragon may not always come in, but for things like that, if you make it, this is what they would have wanted to do, but they've given up on it. If you have the idea of the
Hmm.
revenge quest you've given up on, going back to the Inigo Montoya,
Yeah.
he talks to Wesley when he first meets him. He's searched for 20 years and he hasn't been able to find him. He's just about ready to give up. And that revenge quest I'm now more interested in than I'm turning over every stone. It's
Absolutely.
I don't know where they are. I don't think I'll ever find them.
If they
So
show up, I will absolutely run my blade through their heart. But
yeah, like he was a pirate, of sorts, working with Vizini. He flat out says he does it to pay the bills.
yep.
So you can have it where you're like, yep, I'm a blade for hire because I'm good at it. I do it to pay the bills because I looked for this dragon for 10 years and I couldn't find them. And who
Hmm.
knows where they are now. So I've given up. And then when the dragon comes into the story, your DM will be so excited because they've been waiting to
Yeah.
drop that. And you as a player are just going to light up.
See, for me, the backgrounds that the master objectives that I'm interested in, uh, that I've a few of them that I've played before, a few of them I've just thought through.
Yeah,
But I'm always a little in love with the master objective of a character wants to be in charge of a particular city, or
sure.
I want to have my own kingdom.
Yeah. Like
Those
that
are always going to
kingmaker
be
stuff.
yeah, those are always going to be interesting to me, uh, because you can fit that into almost any story.
You really
Because,
can.
like, why are you out being an adventurer? Because you want to make a name for yourself. So when you show up to a democratically elected, like, to a democratic, city, you can show up and be like, "I'm this adventurer. Make me your king."
Yep.
Or you can just show up and challenge the king to a duel for their crown. Or all of these different ways that your character can become the leader of whatever unit of existence that you want. But having one of those in particular for a character is absolutely beautiful because it lends to doing any and everything just all which manner of way,
Yes.
but you still have the thing that you're going to do. So that's going to make your character be either this like power hungry, just like berserker fighter that's going to challenge everyone to a fight to show that they're in charge, or you've got the kind of spycraft character that's going to learn all of the espionage and all the subterfuge of it.
Yeah. Well, for the barbarian I played, my beloved Takar, he had three objectives really. One was to never go back to his hometown because he was wanted there, so wasn't going to go back. One was to keep his sisters safe because that was his only family,
Mm-hmm.
and what I guess you could have called his super objective was he wanted to be the, just the strongest there was. Just he wanted to know, could he be the strongest?
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't terribly smart, but he was very strong. And after killing a demon prince, he retired from adventuring
Because
because at that
okay,
point,
I'm the strongest.
yeah, it was like, where do I go from here? So he retired and opened a restaurant,
Yep.
and that's what he did. And if we had kept playing, above level 13, I don't think I would have kept playing that character because I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I think he's done. Like I don't think there's anything left for him.
I mean, until something bigger shows up and he pulls a Goku.
Yeah, which I mean, you would.
Yeah. But like that's those are the kind of things with super objectives. And your super objective does not have to be this like it doesn't have to be good if that makes sense.
It can be very simple.
Like
It can be very,
one
very simple.
one of my my master objectives that I only got to play for a very short amount of time was that my character wanted to become this character was a bard, and he wanted to be known in every city on the continent. Not even the
Okay.
entire world, just on the continent. That was the master objective that like if anyone ever asked him what he wanted to do with his life. Uh but the reason why was from his background. He's an orphan. He
Aha.
wanted to become famous enough that he could find his parents.
See, that's interesting.
And so finding his parents isn't the like listed master objective. The listed master objective is he wants to be known in every city on the continent.
Yeah.
And doing things like that, you can build multifaceted characters where you have this character that has this bard that has deep separation anxiety and this deep depression, but is also this famous entertainer, as many famous entertainers are. Uh, and that's just a thing that you can do is you can give your master objectives layers, and that's gonna be way more interesting than just your basic one.
Yeah. And that's not to say that you can't have a great character with something simple. I mean, let's go,
Mm-hmm.
with some of our last bit of time here. Let's go very, very simple, straightforward. Let's just say you're gonna go human, you're gonna go fighter, and you're gonna be a champion fighter. You are the most straightforward class in the game, though still very good. Don't
Yep.
don't ever turn up your nose at that. But if you say you take the
Just because
soul,
it's bread and butter doesn't mean it's not garlic bread, baby.
yeah, and you can take the soldier background, which is one of the classic backgrounds to take
Yep.
for fighter, go ahead and look at the ideal bond and flaw under that one. You can decide that you're going with, you know, that independence is the most important, that if people follow orders blindly, they embrace tyranny. So now, okay, you don't want anybody to have to deal with tyrannical reign. All right, that's building things. You decide your bond, that you will fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. All right, cool. I see you, Captain America. Like we got a little Steve Rogers going here. And you can then decide, okay, I'd rather eat my armor than admit when I'm wrong. And that's going to add some humor to it.
Yep.
And right there, you have a very simple and straightforward, I think you could have a super objective of I want to make sure that if there is tyranny somewhere, that I help
Mm-hmm.
stamp it out.
I want to stamp out all tyranny. That can
Yeah,
be a very straightforward. That's a rough master objective to have, but
it
it's
is.
very straightforward and you know what you're doing.
Yeah, because your DM is going to put you in a bad situation
Oh
where
yeah.
you get involved in some wonderful, wonderful political drama where now it's like, okay, you have to kill this Margrave. But if you get caught doing it, you're going to be wanted all throughout the continent. So,
So put on a mask and get a longbow, bud.
yep, yep. So, yeah, like don't feel like your super objective has to be this hyper complicated thing, but have a reason for doing what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you have a flaw baked into your character,
Yep.
one that's not party or game breaking, just one that
Just a
humanizes.
little flaw.
Yeah, it makes them interesting. And if you have ways that these tie into your background, you've given your DM a gift of
Yep.
things they can add into the game, and you've made your players more invested in your
Yeah.
character.
Like I'll say with the last little bit of time that we have, one of my favorite flaws that I've seen come into play is one of my characters, one of my players took the background of fisherman.
Okay.
Dope, awesome, cool. The flaw that they took, they didn't take one of the like in-list flaws or whatever. They just made this one up. But it's just that he gets antsy if he goes longer than a day or so without going fishing.
I love that.
And so
I love that.
every once in a while he'll just be like, okay, whatever you guys want to do, you do that. There's a lake there, so I'm gonna go fishing for a bit. And just splits the party like that just for a little bit. And he's done it in the best ways, that it's very innocuous. And it's very like, oh, they're going shopping, so I will go fishing.
Yeah.
But he's also, his character is like missed out on a few items because he wasn't there shopping with them because he was going fishing.
It's
But
great though. It's like
he got money from those fish.
It's like how Samuel L. Jackson has it in some of his contracts where he gets a day off every so many days so he can go golfing.
Yep.
That's what he do. And
Yep.
to me, that makes him more interesting as a person. Where I'm like, wait, he has that in his contract that he has to get so many breaks in filming so he can go golfing.
Huh.
Okay.
All right. If I give that level of famous, I'm gonna want NBA 2K breaks.
Exactly. Yeah. I was like, I need nights off for D&D, man.
I need just one day a week where I have like 3 hours off to just play 2K.
I see. And if it were me, and if we're during football season, it'd be like, oh, I don't shoot when the Hawks are playing.
Right.
No, you may not want me to shoot after if they lose. Like, talk to me tomorrow.
But yeah, these are like little flaws that you could have happen. Like, oh my god, thinking of you and the Seahawks.
Yeah.
Imagine if you put professional sports into your game,
Yes.
and your character's flaws that they are hopelessly devoted to I don't know.
Racing.
Yeah. But like just
there's
hopelessly
certain races
devoted
yeah.
hopelessly devoted to the team that's like the Mariners, except for this season so far.
Well, just wait till June.
I said so far.
Yep.
But just have your flaw be that you're obsessed with one of the more losing teams of whatever professional sport. That's gonna be just so entertaining
and so relatable.
Yes, and that's the biggest thing that flaws do. We have gone over time because we always do. But yeah, that's our kind of in on backgrounds and flaws and master objectives.
Have a master objective. Have flaws. Be interesting.
But and all of those things are going to make role playing your character much easier, even if you're not the kind of person that role plays a lot. Like if you're not really into role playing, having these things written out as specifics helps you get into playing a character better.
Yep.
It may or may not be a thing that actors actually do when researching characters, which is why we have so many of these things in our brains as us two being actors. Yeah. It's a whole thing.
Yes,
all comes back to acting, baby. But thank you all for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you all for those of you that came in to watch our one-shot special that we did last weekend that just went up on our YouTube page yesterday.
So fun.
Please go through and like and comment and crack jokes because we want YouTube daddy money. And please come through while we are live doing this show on Thursdays and come talk in the chat and just be here so we can get Twitch daddy money because we're tired of funding this ourselves.
And if we get that daddy money, we're gonna let daddy invest it back in the show, and we'll have better ways to entertain you.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe with actual cool props and stuff during a one shot.
Yep, we won't have just random pieces of foam that I've cut up in my apartment.
Exactly. So get us that daddy money so we can buy toys.
Get us. Make Twitch daddy notice us. Notice me, Twitch senpai. So yeah, please help us by doing all the things of liking, commenting, and subscribing, even though it's fucking nonsense, and I hate that is a metric that we judge things by, but it is how we get that money. So please,
here we are.
Please sacrifice your morals as I have.
a little. It's for us. So
but anyway. But yeah, please do all the things because it helps us out, and we want to be able to put money into this without it being our own money.
Correct.
So yeah. But thank you all for watching. We will be back next week with some topic that we have yet to decide upon.
It'll be
We'll figure it
amazing.
out. But we will see you next week. Always be on the lookout on our Facebook page for when we announce when our next one shot is going to be. It will be sometime next month.
That's the plan.
As we are trying to do a one shot a month for the foreseeable future.
That's the
Until
goal.
we, I don't know, start a full campaign or something.
Something like that.
Wild.
Crazy
Anyway,
talk.
but thank you for all of that, listening to all the closing stuff. And Bjorn, what do we always say?
Do something nice for yourself this weekend.